All right, good morning. We're live on the Falcons Podcast on YouTube. We want to bring in our Facebook groups here as well. Atlanta Falcons on SI and Scott Kennedy Sports. Then we'll get started on a blustery spring day in the southeast. Got windy and cold again. It's in the 40s again with wind howling through the trees. I had coyotes in my backyard. You ever heard coyotes, Nick? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure you have. They can sound scary.
Yep. A lot of yipping and hollering. Yep.
So
yeah, I always love the coyote outfits that the little dogs have too, like ready for war with the spikes on them and everything. But I've definitely had coyotes. Actually, one time a lot of my family's from the state of Missouri, even though I'm from Iowa. And we took right before we moved out to Seattle, we went down to see family and brought our then 4 or 5 month old puppy down there, and a coyote came out from across the way. We were taking out because they live in the freaking sticks. And the dog got behind me and pushed me towards the coyote. So Summit, not a good guard dog. Very, very sweet. But my gosh, if anything's scary, Dad, you go check it out.
Hell, I used to let my outdoor cats. We'll get started here, I promise. Let my outdoor cats go outside. But I've got owls, hawks, coyotes, and copperheads all like in my short vicinity. I'm like, you guys can stay inside. And the owls have moved back in. So we'll get into this now. Welcome in, everybody. This is the Falcons Podcast. My name is Scott Kennedy. I will be your host. This is Nick Kendall over here on this side. He's in Seattle. I am in Atlanta. We are coast to coast with your Falcons coverage. We have a lot to get into. We'll probably start with the Kirk Cousins contract discussion, since that seems to be on everybody's mind in the chat. And we'll also hit on Leonard Floyd. We'll hit on Morgan Fox. We'll hit on Deablo. The 3 bigger name acquisitions that are coming in as free agents. We'll talk some Grady Jarrett, and then we'll finish with a post-free agency mock draft, Nick. So now that we've got into that, let's say hello to some folks in the chat that have come in. Want to say hello to some folks that have come in with the super chats already, like Shannon Davis. Thank you, sir. He says, thank you, Scott and Nick. Appreciate the hard work. He's saying hello to everybody else, like Alan, who was in here very early. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick. And Falcons Nation, that's all y'all. He said, hope all is safe from the storms this weekend. And I guess Terry wasn't bluffing. So the news over the weekend was the Falcons did not cut Kirk Cousins, which invoked a $10 million roster bonus for 2026. It's not payable till 2026, which takes his full guaranteed compensation on the Falcons contract from $90 million to $100 million. So last year, the Falcons paid the man just $62.5 million, but only had a cap hit of $25 million. So there's still $40 million out there that is going to be dead money no matter what because of the signing bonus. What this $10 million does is makes his dead cap hit, if he were to just be cut right now, go from $65 million to $75 million. What the Falcons are doing here, Nick, is gambling. I'm going to gamble $10 million that someone between now and the start of the season is going to want to make a trade for him. Because frankly, I still find it now. The Falcons do stuff that just completely blows my mind all the time. But the idea of Kirk Cousins, disgruntled Kirk Cousins being in the quarterback room as a great backup, to me is asinine. He's already started kicking rocks. He's already started causing a little bit of trouble. It's a distraction that Falcons fans are sick of. What do you think it's going to be like? So for me, the next deadline of movement is when are we really watching? It's not the draft. It's mini camp. OTAs are optional, so I would not expect if he's still on the roster for Kirk Cousins to be there at OTAs. But mini camp, for me, after the draft is the next deadline, is the next Kirk Cousins watch.
I'm keeping my eyes on the draft still all the same, just because there's a lot of picks on the move, and we're going to have some idea about a lot of teams that are still hunting for a quarterback. So after, Cam Ward, Sanders, Milroe, blah, 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 who have Jackson Dart comes off the board, there's going to be some teams that are looking at, I believe, the draft first. And then after, the first round's over, it's like, okay, well, now what? Or they already have contingency plans in place. Like, we really like Jackson Dart. Let's say it's the Browns. We're going to try to trade up to go get Jackson Dart end of the first round. The Giants may beat us there. So then I could see a move happen there. So my eyes are still on the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they'll give him away, but I mean, now that the free agency dust has mostly settled for most teams, besides prepping for the draft and getting all these visits in, like this is what the Falcons are working on right now, seeing if there's anybody out there, what the compensation could look like. So not that I'm saying he will be traded at the draft, but it is a event, picks moved, and a lot of times there are player for picks deals for veterans that happen all the time during the draft. So I'm still looking out there.
Oh, I agree. I just think the deadline is when's the next time the Atlanta Falcons are due to be at Flowery Branch? That's minicamp. So to me, you don't want him there. They don't want him there. He doesn't want to be there. And if he holds out, the greatest thing in the world for the Falcons would be if he held out. Hold out, please. For God's sakes, yes. Yeah. Then they don't have to pay him. They can just find him away. Coach, good to see you. He says, missed you guys. Missed you too. It's good to be back. Lots going on here. Chris, he says, missed you guys as well. Appreciate you. And Philip has a good message. Good morning, fellas in chat. That's all y'all. Smash the like and subscribe. So, and George comes in talking about this. He says, good morning, Scott Nick. Falcons are going to have the most expensive and divisive backup quarterback in history. I hope the situation is resolved as Penix does not need the disruption. And that's it. It's not even the money so much, because the Falcons are like ninth in quarterback room expenditures, which isn't terrible, which also begs you the question, like, wait a minute, how come they don't have any money? It's not all on Kirk Cousins. No, it's not. It's not all on Kirk Cousins. There's a lot of money being spent elsewhere, and a lot of it's in non-premium positions, despite the fact that those players are really good, like Jesse Bates and Chris Lindstrom, guard and safety. $11 million in a tight end. That's pretty expensive as well. They don't want this disruption. They don't want the distraction. They want to move forward with their 25-year-old first-year starting quarterback, and I have a really hard time believing that Kirk Cousins is on the roster. Now, what they did was, like I said, and I wonder if he's traded, and everything's negotiable. Good friend Kevin Knight, Falcoholic, does a wonderful job, and he's really peddling the best case scenario on Twitter, which is the Falcons are able to trade him. That team picks up his entire $27.5 million guaranteed salary for 2025 for a 6th-round pick. And then they'd also be on the hook for the $10 million in guaranteed roster bonuses in 2026. Like, who the hell is going to give $40 million to Kirk Cousins guaranteed right now when the Falcons don't want him there at all? You're out of your mind. There's nobody that's going to trade for Kirk Cousins and bail the Falcons out of this with $40 million of guaranteed money. That's just not going to happen. So you can still get some money back. And can you get a pick and $10 million back so that this move ends up being even? Maybe. That's a gamble probably worth taking when you're already $90 million in the hole, Nick.
Yeah, at that point, what's the difference happening there? Free agency's already passed too, so I guess take it on the chin. The key, and we've said it on here a few times, is getting out from under it as soon as you can to take advantage of what should be the cheat code in team building in the NFL, which is the rookie quarterback contract, but hard to take advantage of when you're paying Kirk Cousins, whether he's on the roster or not. So we'll see what happens with him, his contract. Keeping an eye on what the Titans do, right at number 1 overall. They're going to trade back. The Giants last year were aggressively trying to move up to number 3 to get Drake May. They didn't end up getting a quarterback. So they're not the Giants, I said. Yeah, so the Giants were looking out for. The Titans, of course, as well. The Browns are looking for a quarterback. That one makes all the sense in the world to me. That's the fit I thought that would happen there, Scott.
So they were expecting to be cut and being able to sign him for the league minimum. Now it might cost them. I've said all along, $5 million in a day 3 pick is the best the Falcons can hope for. If they do better than that, that is making the best out of a really, really bad situation. Nick, I posted yesterday, I'm like, I see people doing, Falcons fans doing a sack dance. The Falcons are sticking it to Kirk Cousins by paying him an extra $10 million as if this is a win. And some people just didn't get what I was saying. Well, this was actually the right move. I'm like, I didn't say it wasn't. What I'm saying is this is putting whipped cream on top of a poop sundae. Yeah, I want the whipped cream. I'd be stupid not to do the whipped cream, but I still have to eat the poop sundae.
Yeah.
So it's overall awful. Terrible move for the Atlanta Falcons. But this is trying to salvage something. Anything they can. And they're betting $10 million that they can. And $10 million is probably worth the bet. on this, that they can play chicken. And I've written it that way. The Falcons will play chicken with Kirk Cousins and a quarterback needy team for $10 million over the summer. That's what they're doing. I cannot see him being on this roster. If he's still on the roster, they'll injured reserve him or physically unable to perform, pup him, and you're not allowed to be around our team.
Yeah. Crazy. I don't know. Could be really contentious. The other team, Scott did want to bring up that haven't really talked about them, but they're one of the teams that are still, playing musical chairs for an option at quarterback this season. It seems like back to the Minnesota Vikings. How crazy would that be? Trading him back. Thank you. You paid him up front, and we'll take him back because I don't know if they're not ready for JJ McCarthy or the injury or something, but they've been linked to a lot of veteran quarterbacks as well. So there are 5 teams still that are potentially out there looking for a quarterback.
Well, it would be fair because they paid him on the books like $35 million last year. He had a bigger cap hit for the Minnesota Vikings than he did for the Atlanta Falcons last year. This man, and this goes to the story that came out yesterday. This man has earned as much guaranteed money in 13 seasons as Tom Brady did in 23. It was $332 million that Kirk Cousins has been paid by taking advantage of the market and being available at the right time to the right team. $332 million guaranteed for Kirk Cousins versus 23 seasons. And this isn't like, yeah, but we're talking about Mark McGuire in the steroid era versus, Mike Trout. No. They overlapped a lot.
Yeah.
There was an acceleration, but, Brady was still playing not that long ago. They overlapped a lot of Kirk Cousins' career on here. Edward Brown has a good question. We'll get into free agency a little bit. He says, I'm not sure how compensatory picks work. Will the Falcons receive any for Grady Jarrett, Drew Dahlman, or Richie Grant? You want to hit on this first?
Yeah, I don't think the Falcons, because you released Grady Jarrett, you'll not get anything for him. I don't know about where Grant's contract stacks up right now. If you want to check Nick
Grant, yeah, he'll be lucky to make a roster. I think he's still a practice squad candidate, but he signed for like $1.5 million.
Yeah, so that's not one that you're going to get a comp pick for. Drew Dahlman, potentially. I haven't checked out Nick Corti, who does the draft pick compensation board. He's pretty good at the formula, even though it's like a secret lockbox kind of thing or whatever the NFL does for the compensatory picks. He's been pretty accurate at projecting them. And I don't think I know the Falcons haven't signed anybody that should offset. Again, the rules that they're not transparent to what the rules are, but you should be getting something for Dahlman. I'd imagine it's probably close to a 4th round pick, would be my assumption is where it will stack up, but
which is what he was.
Yeah. So, no, that's the only one. You do not get compensatory picks for players you release. Those are called street free agents. So that's why a lot of teams like the Ravens love to stack up those street free agents because they keep getting those comp picks coming down. Or the Eagles. I think I saw, Scott, the Eagles are supposed to get 5 compensatory picks in 2026. They're going to have like 6 picks in the top 100 or something because all these comp picks that they're getting. So Howie Roseman just keeps getting it done.
Yeah, I can't afford to keep my team together, but at least I'll get something out of it. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. What I didn't ever like seeing is MLB. What they would do is if you'd sign a free agent, you'd have to give up a pick. I'm like, well, that's that sucks. That's not free agent. That's not free. That's like what's the one I hate so much? It's like legal tampering. That's not what it is. That's not free agency. If I have to give up a pick, that's a trade. So I get it. But Dahlman right now is, I believe, is eligible, but Grady Jarrett, because he was released and did not see out the end of his contract and become a free agent, no, and Richie Grant doesn't have any value, frankly. I think you're better off with how do the void years work with Justin Simmons? Because you void his contract in order to, how would that work? I would think Justin Simmons saw at the end of his deal he could be eligible for a comp pick.
I think void years are just like on the contract. I don't think they mess with the compensatory pick formula at all. It's just a trick that teams are doing now a lot to stretch out that cap hit because it's an interest-free credit card, right? You have to pay it 5 years down the line when the cap hit is that much bigger. So that way that cap hit is that much smaller. So teams are using that a lot for better and for worse.
So the next question that's coming in here as we talk about free agency and stuff. Jet Jones, good to see you. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick. Do you think we've gotten better on defense or just took a lateral approach with who we lost? Right now, personnel-wise, I don't think the Falcons are better on defense. And I still think David Onyemata is probably going to be on the way out. I don't know if they're not going to spend, though. It's just still $16 million is a lot of money for David Onyemata this year. When you could save 8 by moving on from him and replacing him without that much money. But, you look across the board and you lose Grady Jarrett and you're replacing him. You're hoping that Ruka Rohoro steps up. Right now, you look at the proposed depth chart, and you got Rook and Brandon Dorlus as your starting defensive tackles if you take Onyemata out as well. Or you could just say Onyemata, who frankly wasn't very good last year. You lose Justin Simmons. You haven't replaced him yet. So there you go. Mike Hughes is back. That's the same guy. You bring in, I think you've gotten better in the linebacker room. Divine Deablo helps. He helps. And then maybe you get a boost back from Troy Anderson. What that means is you're not counting on Troy Anderson. I've got insurance. And if Troy Anderson comes back and plays 15 games at his peak capacity, you got a potential Pro Bowler there in Troy Anderson. And then Leonard Floyd, I believe, is an upgrade on Lorenzo Carter. I think you got better there. But overall, maybe a little worse because I don't think you're as good up front. Morgan Fox is coming in. He might be taking the James Smith-Williams route on this edge-setting defensive end, good against the run, solid professional, but, he's not a needle mover, so to speak. So I think you've personnel-wise to this point, you've probably taken a little step backwards on defense, but let's see what rounds 1 and 2 do in the draft to help fill a couple of those holes too, especially now, Nick, safety. Safety's got paid again. The Falcons are now looking for me for edge, safety are the two big needs.
I'm still looking for cornerback too. Just if I can add somebody. I know you paid Mike Hughes. I was actually pretty surprised to see the number that he got because I didn't think he was all that good this last season. But you got him back here. Well, let's see what the contract was. But keep an eye on him. And I see a comment in here saying that maybe Divine Deablo would offset Dahlman from Sam Klontz. That would be upsetting. Diablo's contract comes in for $7 million a year, where Dahlman gets like 11, 12.
Dahlman's the number 2 paid center in football. Deablo is not. He's probably not top. He's probably his cap hits 15 this year. He got 7. I wrote it down just for this purpose. His cap hits $5 million this year. It's $9 million with 3 dead next year. So it's a 1-year deal with $3 million dead cap or an option next season. Deablo is a mid-tier at best free agent, where Dahlman was a premier free agent. If they offset, that would be a very Falcons thing to happen.
I don't think that'll happen, but you never know, right? Things can change. But we appreciate ATL Jet Jones coming to the 4,999. I think the defense, like you mentioned, Scott, personnel wise, I took a step back. I mean, you're losing Simmons, you lost Judon, who still was your number 1 last season. What you're banking on is coaching and cohesion on that side of the ball, getting everybody pulling the rope in the same direction, where last season, just cats in a bag, just chaos on that side of the ball as far as the defensive game plan and everything going on there. Coaching does matter. So that's the big part, but on paper, a slight setback.
Curtis, good morning. He wants to talk a little bit about Grady Jarrett. So let's hit on this just a little bit. Good morning, Nick and Scott. I heard an interview that Grady said he was blindsided by being cut and then the trade. I don't know how much I believe that, to be honest with you. We've been talking about that this was I always thought that the Falcons would be able to restructure his deal. So he had $16 million in salary on the deal in the last year of his contract. What teams and what the Falcons in particular, and they just did it with Jake Matthews, have done is they take that $16 million of non-guaranteed salary for the final year of the contract. They pay it as a signing bonus. So we give you a 3-year deal. Here's $16 million signing bonus. So you got paid that deal. And then you work out what the next 2 years are. I'm going to call it $15 million because it's easier. Okay. So if I give you a $15 million signing bonus on a 3-year deal, that's a cap hit in the first year of 5, a cap hit in the second of 5, and a cap hit in the third year of 5. It changes. And then I give him $1 million base salary. So you're still making your $16 million. You got $16 million cash, but now your cap hit went from 16 to 6, and I saved $10 million. I was expecting something like that to happen, but we don't know what the back numbers would have been. So would it have been, here's a 3-year deal worth $45 million, which was a pay cut, and we're giving you 15 guaranteed. Or here's 3 for 40 with 15 guaranteed. Here's 3 for 35 with 15 guaranteed. The guaranteed number is the one that matters. Mm-hmm. Grady's on the phone with his agent. He says the Falcons want to give you 15 guaranteed, and I got an offer in hand from the Bears that they want to give you 29 guaranteed. And Grady says, tell Terry to pound sand. That's how I think that went about. I'm not accepting a restructure for 15 guaranteed when I got 30 coming from the Bears. No, that is not tampering. I see people say, how did he have an offer so fast? You can talk to agents whenever you want to. They just can't talk directly to Grady Jarrett. It's the same reason at 12:01 on opening day when the bell rings, all these contracts get announced. These negotiations are already going on. That's why you have an agent. That is not tampering. I think Grady had an offer in hand when he didn't get, when the Falcons tried to restructure him. He said, no, I'm getting twice the money. These guys value me twice as much as you do. I'm out of here. That's what I think happened.
Certainly possible. I mean, before teams are getting these deals ironed out, and I'm sure Grady, this wasn't completely blindsided. I mean, he can say that, but.
And I don't know. I didn't see that. So I didn't see him say that. I'm not saying you're wrong, Curtis. I haven't seen him say that.
Yeah. I'd be pretty shocked, especially with how quickly he was picked up as well. But, you never know. Either way, appreciate his time in Atlanta. Heck of a player, probably the face of the franchise for much of that period, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I know you always love to quote the mic'd up incident where he's like, damn, don't you guys have anyone else to block when they had 3 guys on him? So kind of state of the Falcons defensive line there, but good player. And I'm excited to see what he can do with Dennis Allen out there with the Chicago Bears defense, who are again an interesting team again this upcoming season. But we've said that before, and they've fallen flat. So we'll wait and see there.
And Justin coming in, this is something that we've said. He says, I know we're worried about the defense not getting better personnel-wise, but do we not have any confidence in Ulbrich and Raheem running a better defense? When Lake lost his responsibilities, we got much better on defense. Justin, I've been saying this since Thanksgiving, that the Falcons will be better. I rarely talk in absolutes because they come back and bite me in the ass, especially with this team, for God's sake. Yeah. The Falcons will be better on defense in 2025 simply by moving on from Lake's passive prevent defense scheme. It wasn't just the points, which were 23rd or yards at 25th. It was the inability to get off the field. They were number 1 in passing rating against. They were 31st in points per drive against. They didn't stop anybody. And frankly, special teams were just as bad. Do you know the Falcons? You've seen it, Nick. They had like the worst kickoff and punt return coverage in the league, and we all know what problems Younghoe Koo had. So yes, Justin, from a personnel standpoint, I think this team can take a slight step back, depending on how the rookies play. Because you got to go defense heavy in this draft, depending on how the rookies play. Personnel-wise, you could take a slight step back. Judon's a good player. Justin Simmons is a good player. Grady Jarrett's a good player. Those are 3. They're gone. That said, they didn't play very well last year. So replacing their production shouldn't be that hard. Shouldn't be that hard to do because everybody save Caden Ellis and maybe A.J. Terrell played worse in 2024 than they did for whichever team they were on in 2023 under Jimmy Lake. Worst coach defense I've ever seen, and I do not say that with hyperbole. Yeah,
he was one that had to be gone. I mean, there's just what we saw with Nielsen doing with the Jags having a terrible defense. I mean, that was a massive step down from him in Atlanta. So had to be gone. I mean, what rolls downhill. So Raheem Morris, if it's another bad defense this season, could be should be probably on the chopping block as well. So we'll see what happens this upcoming season with Ulbrich, who at least there's proof of concept. But man, those Jets teams poured copious resources into the defensive side of the ball as well. A lot of like super blue chip players on that side of the ball. So we'll see what happens with them. We got our guy Michael coming in. Island Mike says, morning, guys. Good to see you, Michael. Hope you're doing well down there in Puerto Rico. Appreciate you. One of the good ones. Always good to see you.
Yeah, Michael's a little pissed at Grady for getting paid more money. And I didn't respond to this, Michael. I saw your I was like, I'll say it here where you can hear my voice rather than just type something out. But Grady Jarrett doesn't owe the Falcons a pay cut. He doesn't owe them that. He didn't play very well the last few years. Well, one, he shredded his knee for the Atlanta Falcons and then came back in under a year and was still probably one of their best defensive players last year. And, I have a feeling the Falcons said, we want to give you a pay cut. And he says, no, I don't owe you a pay cut. So the clip that I posted with him saying, Atlanta's my hometown with or without the Atlanta Falcons, and the people there will have a special place in my heart, and I have a special place in theirs. Yes, he does. I'll be a Grady Jarrett fan for life. For life. I'm rooting for Grady Jarrett. So I hope, I don't have any love for the Bears, but I'll be interested to watch them with Dahlman and Grady Jarrett this year for sure. Keith Brugman says, I'm surprised Scott isn't freaking out about Kirk Cousins being a backup right now. I've already done all of my pissing and moaning about how stupid it was to sign him to begin with back in April, and I've beaten that horse to death all the way through, and it totally blew up in the Falcons' faces and proved what a stupid move it was to begin with, like I said in April, despite all of the everything is awesome crowd saying how smart it was to do this all summer. No, it wasn't. There's a reason teams don't do this. Give $90 million guaranteed in order as a bridge quarterback. It was dumb then. It got worse. So, no, I'm not freaking out, frankly, because I don't think he's going to be the backup quarterback. I will be absolutely shocked if he's on this roster. If he's on this roster come week 1 and is dressed out and active, oh, boy. This has the floor for this team goes from 7-10 to 3-14. Where it's just a total Shinola show, and everybody is bailed out on the Atlanta Falcons. They're like, man, I can't wait to get out of here. And it's a total reset at the end of the season. I will be very, very shocked if Kirk Cousins is the backup quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons.
The only prediction I will make is that Kirk Cousins is going to get his. At the end of the day, probably no better businessman at maximizing the value than Kirk Cousins in the NFL. So we'll see what happens with his future, where he's playing, but he's going to do what he needs to do to get that money because that's Kirk.
Wisdom Gamer, good to see you. He's I've been on his podcast before. Unfortunately, a lot of people do this in their off time as far as doing podcasting and stuff like Nick here. He's up at 5:30 in the morning with us. This is my job. So my off time is my off time usually, and I'm not available. I'm usually out watching baseball this time of year with my son, or out, my daughter's doing horseback riding or stuff. But my evenings and weekends are kind of taken usually. So apologies, but I have enjoyed being on your podcast. Good to see you. How about some of the guys that the Falcons did bring in? Leonard Floyd, I think, is a good deal. Wish it was, I feel like Major League. Wish we had him 2 years ago. We did have him 2 years ago. Well, 4 years ago then. I wish we had Leonard Floyd a few years ago, but I still think he is a fairly cost-effective improvement on Lorenzo Carter, and you need 4 guys. He's not the answer. It's not done. You still need to address the edge position in the draft and getting a long-term viable pass rusher. But Leonard Floyd's a good signing, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, 1 year, $10 million is a fine contract for him. He raises the floor of the room. By no means does he keep you from adding edge rusher early/often, but he's somebody that I'd be excited to add for the team, especially for such a low cost.
Justin has another good question. He says Malachi Starks or an edge as their first pick. And for me on that one, I don't necessarily want Starks. I'm actually a little more interested in Emin Worry at 6'3", 220 pounds, 4.38. I mean, try not to fall in love with all of the combine stuff, but he can play too. He's pretty good, and he is a freak on the back end of the defense. I'm hoping that one of the edges is there that can make a difference, and maybe you get lucky and you get Jared Verse, and he becomes NFL Rookie of the Year. As far as on a 1 to 10 scale, how much are we expecting from former third-round pick, season injury, ACL injury, Braylon Trice on the edge this year? And before I'm going to turn this over to you, Nick, I looked this up because I had a fairly viral, well-engaged post about me saying, don't expect much. We need to temper our expectations here with Braylon Trice, because people I see all the time, oh, don't forget, Braylon Trice is coming back. Coming back from what? He hasn't done anything. Never played in the NFL. He was a third-round pick at a premium position, which is basically Desmond Ridder. Let's see if we can get lucky. But I went back, and it was the same exact percentage, Nick. I went back to 2017, and I calculated the top 5 and the top 10 sack people in each class, okay? And frankly, if you have 30 sacks, you're in the top 10 in 8 years ago. So it's a low bar to be in the top 10. So I moved to the top 5. It ended up being the same. What is the percentage that you get a top 10 sack guy after the second round? Take a guess.
2%?
No, it's high. It's a lot higher than that, but it's also including every position. So I didn't filter
I was just straight up edge.
I didn't filter out for other positions. So, it's probably 5% on edges alone, but I included every position.
Okay. 15%.
It's 30. It was 30%.
30. Okay.
So
that's higher than I thought.
It only took 30 sacks because I was like, Carl Lawson in 2017 has 28 and a half career sacks, and he was 9th in 2017 for career sacks in that class. But
so you're looking at it on a per year basis, not cumulatively
in your class
over that time. So
correct. Okay. In your class. So you've got the Max Crosbys of the world. You've got Byron Murphys. The two guys from LA were in that group. That were
Daniel Hunter.
Daniil Hunter is in that group.
Yep.
So it was 30%, but that's across all positions. Inside linebackers, defensive tackles, edges, defensive ends, all positions, 30% chance. So, how much are we expecting from Braylon Trice on the edge? What am I expecting? 0. I'm not expecting anything. He's a third-round edge rusher, and there will be opportunity there. But if he falls, the top edge rushers go early. It's a premium position, just like quarterback and wide receiver. Cornerback, if he was a safety, that'd be different. He's coming off a season-ending knee injury, and he's never played. I think if you get 5 sacks and good defense, you are through the roof. Because I said people need to have expectations about the production. I said, if I want the Falcons to have, and one of the responses on there was, if the Falcons can get multiple guys with 6 to 9 sacks and he becomes a 5 or 6 year guy, that's a good thing. The Falcons haven't had anybody with 6.5 sacks since 2017. I mean, that's what I'm talking about, expectations. We get multiple guys with 6 to 9 sacks. They haven't had anybody with 7 or more sacks in 8 years. And we're going to have Braylon Trice come in here and get, 10 sacks coming off a knee injury as a third-round player who's never played it down in the NFL? Guys, no. You cannot go into this offseason, and the Falcons aren't. That's why you signed Leonard Floyd. That's why an edge is going to be one of their first 2 picks in the draft. And what you get from Braylon Trice is great, but you cannot count on him any more than you can count on Troy Anderson.
Yep. And you need 4 edge rushers. I mean, right now you have 3. I mean, you still have D'Angelo Malone.
No, he's a free agent.
Oh, he's still on our lads. So Are you sure he's a free agent? He was in the same class as Ebiketie.
He was in the same class as Ebiketie. I was positive he was a free agent.
I think he's still 1 year left.
But he was a little bit later, so we may have only had 3 years. He was a third-round pick. He was the end of the third round.
It should still be the same contract.
Yeah, it should still be the same 4-year contract, but do you have to pick up a 4th year, a non-guaranteed 4th year on those guys?
I don't think so. I think he's still here. Chat can let us know, unless you guys released him /waived him. But he's still on our
Spot
list.
Rack, I'm almost positive Spot Rack has him as a free agent. So that doesn't mean they're right. That's what I'm saying. Is that's where I've had that in my head.
You have right now the likes of Ebiketie, Trice, and Leonard Floyd. Caden Ellis, some usage there as well, but you need 4. So there's pathway. Honestly, Scott, there's pathway to 2 edges, like we talked about here, especially with I always mix up Carter and Floyd, but it's Floyd with just a 1-year contract. So there's pathway to multiple edge rushers here.
There's room to play. Yeah. But again, what are you expecting? B-side reviews, he says, what are you expecting? He doesn't have the traits to be much more than a rotational edge, which is why they dropped to the 3rd round. But yes, 1 out of every 10 guys drafted 3rd round or later becomes a guy. And you're hoping, and during the offseason, that's when you hope that guy's going to be your guy. But I cannot build a team on an exception to the rule. It's one of the phrases I came up with. When I was ranking players and you'd get into, 5 stars. This guy was half the guys in the 1st round were 2 stars. You guys don't know what the hell you're doing, or else Brian Urlacher wouldn't have been a Hall of Famer. If 65 D1 coaches knew what they were doing, Brian Urlacher wouldn't have been in New Mexico. So there are the percentages on this, and you cannot build a team on the exception. I'm like, okay, there's 5,000 2-star players. There's 35-star players, and half of them were 5 stars. That's pretty damn good. Yeah. If you could pick out the 22 stars that were going to be 1st-round picks, you'd be amazing. Mm-hmm. But those 20 guys are at 20 different schools, and they develop at a different. So you can't build a team based on the exception. So I cannot go into this season counting on Braylon Trice on the edge to generate pass rush for me.
And the reality is you're probably still 2 off seasons away from this team being anything like that. So, yeah, Malone's still on the team. There we go. Thank you for that, FF Will. But, yeah, the way the contracts work, they're all the same except the undrafted free agents. They get, I think, a 3-year contract with an exclusive rights free agent option, then a restricted free agent option. 1st-round picks get the 4-year with the 5th-year option. And then 2 through 7 get the 4-year contract. So that's
I had it in my head, and I was just flat out wrong on this. Deangelo Malone is someone I would count on a lot more than Braylon Trice. 4th year, you want to talk about traits? He's twitchy, and he started to finally get put on the field last year on something besides special teams, and he ended up with a couple of sacks. So as a designated pass rusher, I would be watching. Hey, he's on the team, Scott. Deangelo Malone, a lot more than Braylon Trice.
Yeah. And with those traits, regardless, he's got some value as special teams. Obviously, you didn't get the ROI for a 3rd-round pick, all the same. But we got Jacob Coons coming in saying, give us reasons to be excited about Shamar Stewart. You're so against drafting him. That's definitely going to happen now. What are the upsides if the Falcons draft him?
It's locked. It's in Sharpie. I've got him in Sharpie on my board. It's like, what's the one that you would be most against? That's the one that they're going to do. You want me to go? Because I've talked the worst about him.
Sure. Because I would love Stewart in Denver, but there's a different level of.
Denver led the league in sacks last year. The Falcons were 31st.
Yep, this is a different situation.
They can afford that. They can afford that. So give us reasons to be excited about Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart is a late bloomer. So it turns out one of the young guys in this business that I know, I was in a chat with him, and he says, I played with him in high school, and he was the worst player on our team. He was a total liability, and then he grew 6 inches. And I responded back, I'm like, well, he's still the worst player on the team. He's just an unbelievable athlete. And he laughed. He's like, yeah, I didn't want to say that in writing. So he is a late bloomer. He is just now figuring out how to play this game as a big guy. I said something similar about Derrick Henry. If y'all longtime watchers know what I said about Derrick Henry coming out, I'm like, he's either going to be washed. I loved when he went to Alabama because Nick Saban is either going to turn this guy into a grown man or he's going to wash him out, because Derrick Henry was Charmin soft. He was so soft, mentally soft, physically soft. Those guys, there's an old saying, if they won't bite you as puppies, they're not going to bite you as dogs. So you worry about the guys who are soft. Can they become grown-ass men? Derrick Henry became a grown-ass man. He started running like he was 6'3", 245 pounds and a state champion 100 meters guy, and he's a Hall of Fame running back in my book. Shemar Stewart has those traits. He hasn't figured out how to use them yet. He is a freak of nature. He has no idea how to play this game. If he figures it out, the dude could be Bruce Smith, for God's sakes. He's got that type of power, speed, and athleticism.
I think he's got surprisingly good bend for somebody his size and weight. The ankle flexion, there's a few there where you don't see many guys with his body type profile with the ability to turn the corner. Now, you're not going to be confusing him for Von Miller, but that's not always, how you win when you have length and strength. So he can do that, of course. He does need to work on finishing better. But however, if you go back and watch the tape, you see people like Sellers out there at, I'm going to start naming some college quarterbacks here. So sorry if this goes over in anybody's head, but we're SEC country. You guys watch a lot of SEC ball. Sellers at South Carolina is an unbelievable athlete for the position. You see Stewart on him and Sellers gets an incompletion. So that's somebody who I love Lenora Sellers. He's very fun. You see him harass DJ Lagway as well, who's also a really good athlete, makes an athletic play to get away from the sack. So we do have to see Stewart finish a little bit more. And the other thing is, across the board, Scott, we have some kind of proof of concept of Texas A&M not getting the most out of their players on the defensive line. So you have Nick Scourton, who is probably going to be a top 40 pick. Really, really impactful for Purdue 2 seasons ago. Goes to Texas A&M and looks like a shell of himself. I mean, not very good, not giving him many chances to rush the passer, much more reactive in how he's engaging with blocks and trying to read off the quarterback in the run game than attacking. And then you also have Walter Nolan, who was the number 1 overall recruit in his class. Really, really talented player. Never really came to his own at Texas A&M. Goes to Ole Miss this season and has a much better season. So it could be coaching. It could be scheme. I think, unfortunately, Scott, with where we sit, we're not going to be privy to how the kid is hardwired and asking those kind of questions like, what's going on here? Explain it to me. What were you asked to do with all that stuff? And for me, again, he has enough physical traits that if I like how the kid is wired as far as work ethic and intelligence, I bet on that every time. But if I get a sniff of laziness or lack of intelligence, because I mean, defensive line's not as important. Linebacker, safety, like I got the Bill Belichick safety rule where they have to be like the smartest person on the field. Ideally.
I agree with you. I've started looking at like some of the best safeties, and I'm like, Boston College, Justin Simmons, Stanford,
Yep.
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame.
I want those guys. I do. I want those safeties out there.
Yep. Those are the guys. I mean, Bill Belichick really was like, if you're not a brilliant, smart guy, you're not getting on the damn field. And I definitely play by that rule too with safety. But for Stewart, I'd be fine with him at 15, especially in this class, Scott. I think at 15, ideally you guys are trading back. I've said that. How many times can we say that? But I think 15 overall is not like 15 last season or the year before. It feels like after pick 6, 7, 8 kind of falls off a cliff a little bit. So 15 is going to feel a lot like 25 or 30 last season. I think that's kind of the caliber range of prospect you're going to get there. I think the top 100, I think day 2 is pretty solid. But your first round grades, I don't know if necessarily is going to be a first round grade. With that said, Scott, I'm talking a lot about Stewart because of the traits and how this class stacks up and the position he plays. I think it's a 50-50 proposition if he's even going to be there at 15 at this point.
Yeah, again, so there's reasons to be excited about Shemar Stewart. That's not who I would want, but there's absolutely reason to be excited about him. I mean, the RAS, I love RAS, relative athletic score. He's number 1 all time with his testing scores at the NFL Combine. That's pretty good. So let's run through this real quick. NFL Mock Draft Database has added the Falcons' second 7th round pick, so we have 5 picks. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this because we got to get out of here pretty quick. But it is NFL Mock Draft Monday. For me, what has changed in free agency, I think inside linebacker has moved way down on the list when I don't have another day 2 pick. So I'm good going in with Caden Ellis, Divine Deablo, J.D. Bertrand, and Troy Anderson as my 4 linebackers. I'm okay with that. So I think you filled that hole. And, unless I'm absolutely gaga over a linebacker, I need a defensive back, and I need an edge, and I need a defensive tackle. So that's where I'm looking at that. OMC, yeah, Troy Anderson was a perfect 10 on his relative athletic score. You know who else was that high? Ruka Rohoro was a 10, I believe.
They're up there. I'm curious. I mean, it obviously changes every year because the guys move up the sample size. But with what happened with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, is wide receiver on the table day 2, day 3?
Maybe of day 2 for sure. Day 2 for sure. I'd prefer not, but yes, wide receiver. I've called it a sneaky need in writing on Falcons on SI. I've called that a sneaky need all along because Drake's going to be expensive. Darnell, you'll be able to get out from under his contract after this year, but you get one more year of Darnell. Then you're going to want to start resetting the clock on some of your rookies. Again, this is going to have to change if we're going to keep using this. So Will Johnson, the corner, is there, as you mentioned. Mikael Williams, he didn't test very well.
He tested like Joey Bosa, and his 10-yard split, I think, was the 80th percentile.
At the Georgia Pro Day, he was in the 4.7s, 4.8s.
Yeah, so which is the same as Joey Bosa.
Yeah, it was, I'm not sure. And Joey Bosa, there's another conversation. Joey Bosa's not Nick.
No.
He's struggled a little bit on that. This comes down to how good do I think Will Johnson is? Do I want Mikael Williams or Mike Green on here, or James Pierce Jr., Kenneth Grant? There's a lot of good options here. What does this say to us, Nick?
Trade down.
Trade down. Trade down. I'm not doing Joe Andrews, no offers. I'm not doing trade downs. And this isn't a great wide receiver class in the first round for sure. So I think that'll help. No. I would be happy. I don't know much about Barron.
I was going to say Barron's the one who I am really interested in here.
I could be, again, look, I would be happy with any of these guys except for maybe Kelvin Banks. Even Tyler Warren, for God's sakes. I mean, you could find reasons to be excited about Tyler Warren. There's not a lot of ways you could go in here where you'd be like, what are you doing? Except quarterback. And there's no way that's going to happen. But trade back is the answer here. But again, I still like Mike Green here. My Leonard Floyd doesn't change that for me. I think he's the most polished, most productive right off the bat. Mikael Williams, I'd choose between those two. You pick for me, Nick.
I do have a question for you first. Mike Hughes contract, 3-year, $18 million, $6 million per. Does that change anything for you as far as the immediate needs for this team? It's not a 1-year deal; it's 3 years.
It's probably his guaranteed probably makes it 2, and it's still not that much for a corner.
Yeah.
So I still definitely need a corner here. I absolutely need a corner. I can move Mike Hughes to slot because I don't have a slot corner, and you're basically playing a nickel 75% of the time.
If you want a slot corner, if you want a slot corner that you love, the answer is Jahdae Barron. He is a really good tackler. He won the Jim Thorpe Award.
I don't draft guys for the slot.
Yeah, I think
draft my best corners available, and if they need to play the slot, then I move them in the slot. Just like I'm not drafting in the first round. I'm not drafting a slot receiver. If he plays in the slot, Jerry Rice played a lot in the slot, but I'm not drafting a slot receiver here. I'm not, I'm not drafting scheme. You move guys outside to inside.
I'm going to make a case for Jahdae Barron here. Tested extremely well. He's played the slot really well. Good tackler. If you hear his podium session at the Combine, teams are going to love this kid. It seems like he's perennially mocked in the top 13 nowadays. Tackles well. He had unbelievable ball production as well. And there's questions like, is he actually going to be that good of an athlete? Tested great also. So I think he's got an extremely high floor. He can play boundary cornerback. He can play safety. He can play slot. I think it's those pathways for him make him really intriguing. Ideally, it's a pass rusher here, but let's go with Barron at this point.
Yeah, we'll mix it up a little bit. And then what we have seen is there's front 4, front 5 guys in the second round. There's not necessarily corners there.
Jahdae Barron reminds me of. Daniel Jeremiah's compared him a lot to Brian Branch, who's a little bit of a slot safety hybrid. I've also heard Trent McDuffie thrown around a lot as well for him, who's best in the slot. So now we can make this real quick because we go Donovan Ezeuruiko Ezeuruku
in the second round.
Yep, and he tested better than I thought he would. Some of the largest bag of moves as a pass rusher, which is pretty funny to watch with him. So yeah, this would be a really good haul here. You got a good cornerback / just secondary guy who I think can play every single spot in the secondary, and then a good edge rusher.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like I think you almost have to go safety in the second if you don't, if you want to go defensive back. If you go pass rusher first round, which obviously we're good with, defensive line, we're good with that. Corner, we're good with that. But I don't see the corners in the second round as much as I see safety, defensive tackle, edge being available in the second round is something to think of. But again, before everybody screams, trade down. If I'm sitting there at 15 and I see 6 guys I like, for God's sakes, pick up something and move back 3 spots. So that would still be where I would go. Someone, I think it might have been Keith, asked, when's the last time you advocated for a pre-draft move up? Never. Probably never. It's been a while.
I do if you love a quarterback, go get
quarterback.
him.
Yeah. Yep. The quarterback, but that's been a while. Looking here, that's the wrong Shamar. You could fool somebody in there. Oh God. And see, here's Deablo right here. If he's there at 118, if he's there at 90, I'm finding a way I'll package something together to go get him at 90. I don't mind doubling up on edge here. I think Deablo is a beast. I think he is a huge sleeper. I've seen him mocked in the first round, y'all, in some places. And this is one of those guys I talked about.
Yeah,
and B-side on this, and this is why I say if Mike Green is on the board, you got to go premium position. His slot is way less important than edge. I'm drafting cornerback. And if he plays slot, so be it. Or maybe I move Mike Hughes into the slot. Maybe I've got I can think of as Jihad Campbell is in my head now. The kid from Utah, the one Pac-12 player of the year, Clark Phillips. I got Clark Phillips, who should be in the slot in that space. See, Nick's going for the big guys. He wants linebackers playing slot corner these days.
I mean,
I'm not drafting a guy to go play slot. If that's where he ends up, so be it. I'm drafting cornerback. Drafting cornerback, and my 2 best corners are going to be outside.
The way I view it more like what the Chiefs do with Trent McDuffie, where you have a really smart ball production, tackling oriented cornerback who, if you're in base, Trent McDuffie stays on the field, but he has so much impact in the run game and the quick pass game as a physical presence in the slot that he has. When you're living in nickel or dime, what'd you say, 75-80% of the time, he's still on the field. So I agree with you at edge. I just want to kind of switch it up with Barron there. And again, you already made the pick. That's fine. But I also like Texas's other safety, Makuba, as well, who's a really good player. So I wanted to give him a shout out.
We're still hurting at safety on this. Where's Richie Grant when you need him? We're still hurting at safety if we do this. But I would and frankly, B-side, I would have traded down. But I still, you would have been hard pressed to talk me out of one of the edges if this was real. If I'm the GM and Nick's my assistant GM, I would have been real hard pressed not to pick an edge. But this is a mock draft. We got 6 weeks to go, and we've had some fun here. So another edge again. I feel like I can get pass rushers after the first, or at least beyond 15. Get help on my front 5. I really would like to find a tradesy safety here, but right now you're just doing whatever you can. Ty Hamilton has fallen. There's not a lot going on here, Nick, that gets me excited, but it is in the 7th round. Keandre Lambert-Smith's a steal. He is an absolute steal. Wide receiver, he was 4th in the SEC in yards and touchdowns, and he went 4.4 at the combine. I mean, he's so slept on as a 7th round wide receiver.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. That's a good one. I like Majors. Upton Stout's really good. Nazir Stackhouse for the size.
How about and let's just get our safety to flush out the room here. Who do you like, Craig Woodson, or do you like Dante Trader?
Let's go Trader, but who's up above Trader there? I know we already took wide receiver, but Jalen Lane is somebody I like a lot. Scott. So I know you already took one, but I probably would have gone with him over Lambert Smith even.
There we go. So and again, meeting the needs here. I think linebacker is not off the board, but of these free agent moves, linebacker is the one that got pushed down some. That's the one that got pushed down some. I'm okay with the 4 Falcons linebackers going into the season. I'm okay with that. Safety's scary right now. Cornerback's still a little scary, and edge is still a little scary. Also, defensive line is a little scary. Need to get some on the defensive line. The needs on this team, let me just sum this up for you. The needs on this team are still edge, defensive tackle, safety, and cornerback. Those are still the biggest needs on this team. Linebackers come down a little bit. That's what I think, Nick. What are your final thoughts on this?
I'd be happy with this. I think that, with after the combine, Scott Azaraku was getting mocked in the top 25 a lot. So to get him,
I've seen 00 in the top 30.
Yep. So that'd be great. And I just, again, we haven't talked about Jahdae Barron, but you have a needed slot right now. And there's a chance that Barron is the second defensive back off the board. And he's one of the ones that coming out of the combine. Did you ever see the movie A Christmas Story with Little Ralphie? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry to way out here.
Familiar.
Okay. It's like he's like talking about the BB gun essay, and the teacher's like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing."
You ever see Star Wars? Have you heard of Star Wars?
I've seen Star Wars. Some people don't watch Christmas movies.
No,
but
Chris,
the teacher,
remember, I'm a Gen Xer.
Yeah.
So I was like 10 when that movie came out.
Great movie.
I've watched it every year since.
Good one. Perfect. He's like, I want a BB gun. Every little boy should have one. Teacher's doing the A++++. That's what the marks are coming out for Jahdae Barron's character out of the combine. People absolutely are enthralled with his mental makeup, his approach to the game. It's going to be hard for him not to be a positive impact player in the locker room. So I want to give a shout out to Barron. Barron and Jalen Walker are two that coaches and apparently coming out of the combine are tripping over themselves with the mental preparation side. So just want to throw that out there. Barron's a viable option.
Keith asking, we're going to get out of here. Did the Falcons need to look at a late round quarterback if they trade down and pick up extra picks? I had a Gary, good to see you. Opalka, thanks for all the effort. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the support. It means a lot that you go out of your way like that to support the channel. So when I traded down with a very unrealistic as the one I posted, it was like, if only it was this easy. I got like 4 guys that I've seen in the first round with 4 picks. And then somebody was complaining that I took Riley Leonard in the 4th. I'm like, I got 3 4th-round picks, and you're complaining about this guy? My first 4 guys are going top 25. What are you talking about? You're complaining about this? So, yes, if you trade down. Nick, if you got to go, I'm happy to keep answering a couple questions. A couple trade down partners at 15. Steelers, Broncos, if they want to come up. And Tyler Warren was on the board. If Tyler Warren is still on the board at 15, Sean Payton might be on the phone. Even with they just got Powder Springs native Evan Ingram. We love our Georgia boys here in Atlanta. A lot of high school football is big here, and most Falcons fans are Georgia high school football fans. So Evan Ingram, Powder Springs native, just signed with the Denver Broncos. I would keep an eye on them as well.
I'd keep an eye on the Commanders. I'd keep an eye coming up for something to being aggressive, trying to win in this Jaden Daniels window. I'd keep an eye on the Houston Texans after they traded Laramie Tunsil. If an offensive tackle falls down the board, I'm keeping an eye on the Pittsburgh Steelers, depending on what happens with quarterback. So those are teams that interest me as far as trade down options, as well as the Broncos if Genty falls.
Terry, you got to remember, Nick's 30 years old. He wasn't born when the Christmas Story came out. So this is like, asking one of us, have you seen A Wonderful Life, which I actually haven't. Did you see Wizard of Oz? Not everybody under 30 years old has seen A Wizard of Oz. We all did because there were only 3 channels coming on, and it was either that or 60 Minutes Wizard of Oz or, PBS. We'll have Wizard of Oz on. So we are out of there and out of here. It's good to be back. Missed Wednesday last week. Apologize for being gone. It was a busy week. It wasn't a perfect timing, but it was kind of unavoidable. And we will be back on Wednesday. We'll see what happens as we step one step closer to the draft, which is coming. And no, Harry, I haven't seen Sound of Music either. So again, those were before I was born. I think I was born in 73. So kind of the golden age of movies when I was, my first 20 years with some good stuff in there. So we're out of here. Drop your favorite older movies in the comments just for fun. We will see you on Wednesday. Hope y'all had a good, fun Monday morning with us. We appreciate y'all being here. Thank you to our Super Chat superstars, Shannon, Coach coming in, Edward Brown, ATL, Jet Jones, and Gary closing us out. Michael Ronquillo always in the house, the Sunrise. Y'all have a great rest of your week. We will see you Wednesday. Thanks for being here, everybody.